Hi, we're back. Sorry to have missed you last week. See if I can turn this down. There we go. This is our usual Facebook Live on Thursdays at 2 Eastern. I'm Rebecca Ramadevi Preen. If we're meeting for the same time, at the same time, for the first time, give a minute for Facebook to notify people if they want to get this live. Otherwise, the recording will be available. How's everybody doing? I always feel like, it's so cliche to talk about the weather, but the weather has been really extraordinary. I think I've been talking about this for like a month, that it gets crazy, crazy hot. Like 90, 97, 98. For some of you on the West Coast and Southwest, I know you're like, whatever, it's 115. And then it's like 57. So, and raining. So this is what we get. The up and down, kind of like the fluctuations of the mind, right? Thing that sends us round and round. Oh my God. My guru used to say this great thing. It was like 1 minute you're it, and the next you're shit. To explain that experience of how like the mind and our talk and our emotions and how we respond to things can like send us into a different space, just like that. And the weather has been like that. So that's how I'm relating it to our practice today. But every Thursday I hop on in the Facebook group and we talk about how to bring all of you, creative, spiritual, and professional, together into your work in the world. And then what that brings up when we walk that path. And today I want to talk about and share some facts and some insight around one of the primary practices that we do together when we work together to do that. And that is the practice of mantra. Since you're here, you're already familiar that I work in that way with people. But I wanted to spend a little time sharing some more in depth about what mantra is, what kind of mantras we use, and how I listen for those personally for you. Because when we work together one-on-one, I listen for the practice that's going to be most beneficial to you right where you are, right? And then as we work together and things shift, the practice changes. So I want to share a little bit with you about how that process is. How do I offer you a practice that's specific for you? How do I even do that? And why would you even want that? Like, why is this practice specifically, when it's tailored to you, why is it so effective? And I want to offer 5 ways. I'm not offering it. I'm sharing with you 5 aspects of the way that mantra operates when we practice it. So you can see and hear, begin to understand the different levels of being that we're engaging with at the same time when we practice mantra, which is like one of the reasons that it is so powerfully transformative. Okay, so it has the power to transform us, to transform how we are in our life, to transform, I hesitate to say to transform circumstances, because actually my relationship with that is that it transforms us so that we're able to perceive and see and be in circumstances differently, so that then we see these opportunities open up, right? That we may not have been able to see, or we may not have been available for previously. So what is mantra? Mantra is the repetition, the vocalized repetition of sacred sound. And when we work together, we work with Sanskrit mantra from a lineage of practice that's still pretty broad. It's called Tantric Shaivism. Shaivism comes from the word Shiva, if you're familiar with Shiva. He's right behind me. Let me see if I can move him into the... He's there as his dancing self, the Nataraj. And that is a set of practices, a set of lineages of practice underneath the umbrella of Hinduism. So Hinduism is actually an umbrella term that encompasses a number of different traditions. And then Shaivism is another term that encompasses a particular type or lineage of practice that then which has different lineages underneath, and it's passed on from teacher to student orally, right, over millennia. And so we use Sanskrit mantra from this tradition when we work together. And Sanskrit is a very particular language. It's a vibrational language, which means that it was discerned so that we could repeat the sound level vibration of particular qualities that exist inside of us and exist outside of us everywhere. Okay, so the different qualities like beauty and openness and gratitude and transformation and sovereignty and liberation and release and groundedness, right? Insight. These types of qualities, abundance, generosity, those are all divine qualities, right? They're sacred. And we are part of that, right? Those qualities exist within us. And so Sanskrit, when we use it, when we speak the sound, right? When we vocalize the sound, we're creating a vibration that creates an experience that is a particular quality, right? So we have a particular experience of something, right? Of a recognition of beauty, of an opening of generosity, of a release of grief. And particular sounds do this better than others. And so that's what the process of that's how Sanskrit was discerned and how it has evolved. So that means that there's no abstraction in it. It's not like in our spoken languages, day-to-day languages, where we describe something and we have a word that describes the thing that it is. The word's not the thing. So the example I always use is like the moon describes the moon. We can say the word, and saying the word is like pointing at the object. It's not actually the moon, but we know what it is that we're referring to, right? There's an abstraction there in our language. In Sanskrit, because it's vibrational and experiential, the sound is the thing. Like, that's it. There's no differentiation. It's like the sound for moon would be moon, an actuality of it. And here's the other layer, in the subtle energy form, right? So we've got matter, right? We can feel it, we can touch it. And then we have more subtle forms of energy that we can work with and we can perceive and we can use. And that's part of our intuition, right? Our ability to perceive the subtle energies is part of our higher wisdom. It's part of our intuition. And that is what mantra through sound is tapping into and using. Okay. Please let me know if you have any questions as we go along. I'm happy to answer them. So that's what mantra is generally. Now, there are multiple types of mantra, and there are innumerable numbers of mantras. I got asked the question recently, how many are there? Like, I don't know. How dare I use mantra with people if I don't know how many? And I say that kind of facetiously because I know that I could spend a lifetime doing this and studying it and practicing it and teaching it and still not know the entire body of mantra. So, what we work with together is one, mantras which I am extraordinarily practiced and familiar. That's how I was taught to taught, and that's what I've been initiated into teaching, so to speak. I given permission, so to speak. with the caveat that I will not work with people with mantras that are new to me. And that's because you become, through the sound, through the practice, very familiar with the subtle energy of the mantra itself. And when you become familiar with it, well, then you can start to understand what's being called in, what's being needed, what's nudging. So you want to make sure, I want to make sure that I'm familiar enough with that so that I can offer you a practice that's valuable, but that also so that you're safe in it, so to speak. Do you know that you're held, and that I know that I can hold you in it, that my lineage of practice and how practiced I am with it, I can hold you in that practice, whatever may come. That said, most of these practices in the practice of them are surprisingly gentle and like exactly what you need, right? That's part of having it discerned just for you. It's like, all right, let's find the one that gives you just what you need in the way that you need it, not in a way that like blasts open something that you and your system are not ready to touch upon yet. Okay, so back to the mantras that we use. So given all this, what are the mantras that we actually use? So when we work together, we use one of two types of mantra. Either the mantra that's the name of the divine pattern of qualities that we're invoking and working with and cultivating. So each of the, I was talking about how Sanskrit is the sound vibration of qualities, right? Of the subtle energy of qualities. And so each of these, there were patterns discerned in the qualities, ways that they fit together and operate. And those patterns were named, right? Based on the sound that evoked. The name is the actual pattern in sound vibration of those qualities. And then, the myths grew up around the names to explain to us, to explain to the human mind what the actuality of this is. How can we learn more and go into a deeper relationship with the divine and with the self and with the, mystery and dance of the universe through this practice, through the related practices, right? The myth gives us something for our mind to understand so that we can take us then more deeply, and we can use the mind in tandem with the practices. Okay. So we use either the foundational mantra practice, so it's a one phrase mantra practice that works with the name of the pattern, right? So I'll use Rama, for example. So Rama is the divine pattern of Dharma, the path that you walk. Some of the key qualities of Rama are focus and ease. Okay, and so we would use the mantra Om Shri Ramaya Namaha, right? One phrase, several words, names the pattern. And we're evoking these qualities, particularly of focus and ease. The other kind of mantra that we use together when we practice is a seed mantra or a bija mantra. And a bija mantra is a seed sound. So meaning it's like, if you think about how a seed, like an acorn, think about an acorn, and it holds the pattern of the entire tree in that small, compact, really dense matter. Well, a seed sound is that. Seed sound is the acorn of the divine pattern. So for Rama, it would be Ram, right? Or another iteration of it is Shri, but that gets a little, we can go. There's overlapping stuff with all of this. But point being is that seed sound is like we used in our 5-day, this again, practice, Ram, Ram, just one syllable that hits a beat and condenses all of the pattern into its most potent form. So those are the two types of mantras that we use when we work together. And I listen for which mantra is going to be the most beneficial for you right now. Say we were to start today. Where are you at? What's happening? Where do you want to get to? And what mantra practice are we going to use at this stage of that? Knowing that it might change over the course of our work together. So how do I do that? Those of you who have received a personal mantra, for the last 5 years, I offered standalone personal mantra practices at the turn of the year. I spoke to this back then too, so this may be familiar with you if you have received one from me in the previous years. It's a meditative process, and remember, we're working vibrationally, we're working energetically. So what I'm doing is I'm going into a meditative state. I have a set of practices that I do. First, before I do that, I actually, I like to listen to your voice. We're going to talk about voice in a minute. Because actually you express, right? You express as an energy pattern. So you've got your body, you've got your subtle energy body, right? You too have those aspects to you, just like the entire universe does. And you express, right, at a particular vibration. Like you give off a certain, like the colloquial way of saying that is like you give off a certain energy. You just do. We all do. And your voice gives off that energy, and your face gives off that energy, and your body gives off that energy, and how you do what you do, how you approach various situations gives off that energy. It just does. And sort of innately, we know this. Our mind wants to kind of sometimes object and be like, what do you mean I'm a vibration? But we also innately know this about ourselves and each other, right? On some level. So it's that. It's you express as a particular energetic vibration. And so I typically use your voice in order to hear that. And it's a very subtle listening, right? It's not at the level of voice, actually. It's subtler than that, which is the reason for the meditative state, is to listen with what's called the third ear to that subtle energy vibration of you. And I'm listening for two things. I'm listening for what your vibration actually is. When you're you, completely and utterly you, and your energy is totally clear, what is that, right? I'm listening for that really clear energy of you. And then I'm listening, what's the disruption? Is there a disruption? What else is happening? Is there anything else happening? Is there anything disrupting that clarity so that it's not clear anymore in some way? Okay? So those are the two things that I'm listening for, perceiving. It's hard to even use a word to describe because it's listening and it's not listening at the same time. It's so subtle that it's like a disruption in the field, so to speak, right? There are ripples. So I'm listening, kind of perceiving those two things. That's what I'm in inquiry around. And then I ask what practice, what mantra is going to even out and harmonize the disruptions rather. So I want to know what practice is going to be best at harmonizing whatever is mucking up your energy being completely clear, so that you can be you without interruption. So that stuff, the sticky stuff, I mean, what we're really talking about here on energetic terms is we're talking about the gunk, the thing that's keeping you in the going round and round, right? There's something there that hasn't been brought to the surface yet, hasn't been dislodged, wants to be heard, wants to be seen, or just simply needs to be cleared up. Like just sometimes it's a little something that it's like, oh, that just drops away like that. It wasn't really anything except to knock it off a little bit with some vibrational attention. But we're working with that. We're saying, because that's what's showing up when I listen. That's the disruption. The disruption when I listen to your vibration is the same thing that is causing a cycle of, oh my God, this again? Why can't I get anywhere? I find myself in the same place again. However it is that you experience that kind of, oh my God, this again. I can't seem to get any clarity. It's the same thing, different versions of the same phenomenon. So I'm going to ask what mantra is going to help you with that the most, right? Right now. And then that mantra is going to start to come to me. Again, because I only work with mantras that I'm incredibly, I'm familiar with, that I've worked with for 15 years, some of them less, but you know what I'm saying. Like I'm familiar with these energy patterns and with the mantra practices, so that most of the time they tap me on the shoulder somehow. Sometimes I use some cards. I have some cards with the mantra practices, names of them written on it. Sometimes I do a pull. I pull a card. Either way, whatever happens, I say the mantra, I listen to you again. I say the mantra, I listen to you again. And I want to know, I want to perceive that there's a harmonizing with the mantra. That the mantra is massaging that disruption and your clear vision, your clear vibration into harmony. Okay? So there's not like the static or the blip anymore. That's what I do. Do you have questions? People are like, how did you learn how to do this? That is a story for another day. But that's how it works. And then we practice together. And I'm doing the same thing when we practice together. I'm listening. I'm not just practicing with you. What I'm actually doing when we practice together is I'm listening to the mantra, to hear what's happening in the practice, to see if it's telling me anything, if it's telling you anything. Sometimes you hear things, right? You receive wisdom. And one of the things that I'm listening for is this still the right practice? Or is there something else that we need to shift around? So that's how those things work. And the powerful thing is that mantra practice operates at the energetic, like we're shifting the energy pattern of what is keeping you stuck. And one of my swamis always has said that we can't shift something until it's shifted at the level of prana. So until it's shifted at the level of energetic life force, right? That it's going to keep coming back in different ways. So what mantra allows us to do is work with it directly in the form that it is showing up, that energetic form. And that's why it can be so powerful, particularly when it's discerned in this way for you personally. And my experience is that we can get really specific and fine-tuned, not just with the practice itself, like which mantra we use, but with the pitch of your voice that it's chanted at, with the focus of your attention in the body, and also with our intention that we set in the practice. So I personally have had incredibly surprising results. This past year have worked with a seed mantra practice for a pattern that I don't know how long it's been there and would not shift, right, in my neck and my skull and upper shoulders. And all of a sudden, it's like everything was opening, everything was clear. There's a connectivity, right, between the top of my spine and the bottom of my spine that there wasn't before. I mean, my chiropractor kept telling me, your nervous system isn't speaking to each other. It keeps getting disconnected, right? And the disconnect, I would feel like my head was severed from my body. That's how extreme this pattern was. And it was really entrenched. And what I found is that the particular mantra plus my attention on the space in my body, plus the pitch would decide where the opening was and where the release was and where the transformation happened. And literally within days, I was like, oh my God, I feel like a different person. What took me so long? What took me so long? Who knows? I must have just been ready. And that's why it can be really important and really valuable to have a practice for you, as opposed to receiving a practice that's been given to, I don't know, that you picked up in a class, or certainly from a book or a website, which I don't actually recommend, even though there are some good teachers who have written books. I would get their audio version, because you're receiving energy from the teacher when you receive the mantra, and you want to receive it as it is pronounced also. And you just really can't do that from a book. I know even I look and I'm like, okay, I know how to pronounce these words, and I have no idea how to actually chant this mantra. So those are my comments on that. Last thing I promised I would share that I didn't share in the written post this week was the power of the fact that mantra operates on multiple ways, multiple levels, shall we say, at the same time. And I wanted to talk about 5 of those. One is the mind, the other is the breath, the voice, subtle energy, which we've already talked about, but I'll touch on briefly, and karma. So at least those 5 things we are working on. And the mantra operates at these 5 levels, or in these 5 ways, no matter what. Like, you just have to do it. It doesn't require your belief. It doesn't actually have to do with your intention, although that intention, as I mentioned previously, with things being highly effective, adds another layer to it that we can talk about. But it doesn't matter. One of the beautiful things I love about mantra and all the tantric practices is that you don't have to believe any of it. You don't have to believe Rama as a mythical character or a deity in order to do you just have to do the practice and see what happens. So the actuality is in the practice, not in the belief. And that's really one of my favorite things about yoga, because I have a really snarky mind. And my snarky mind is like, yeah, I don't think so. Really? Nah. But you can't deny experience, right? So, these 5 operational levels. The first is the mind. So mantra actually means, if we were to translate it, one translation, a succinct translation, is mind instrument or tool, right? Or what's the word I'm looking for? I'll come to it. And it is the part, so the name, as you said, the name in Sanskrit is the thing, right? So it was named because of the functionality of it, of the experience of what mantra does for us. And it is a tool for the mind. Very first introduction I ever had to mantra, it was described as yoga for the mind, right? We have asana, which is yoga for the body. Mantra is yoga for the mind. And it's the part of the mind, which brings me back. I really was going to tie in my jibber jabber from the beginning of this live, when I was talking about the weather and relating it to the mind, because mantra is from and works on, operates on, helps to balance and silence and bring into focus the part of our mind that is the fluctuation of our thoughts and our feelings, right? So that intellectual, emotional mind part that fluctuates wildly in and out right? What is the poem? This is a guest house, right? Where the guests go in and out. And the guests are our minds, our thoughts, our emotions. So it's the part of the mind named manas. Manas. There are three parts of the mind. Manas, and that's the fluctuating of our thoughts and our emotions. And so it works to focus everything. It gives something. I also think the genius of it, my experience, my personal love of it, also arose from the fact that it gives my mind something to do. It's not completely silent, right? I actually have something to divert the mind with, and it's a useful and purposeful diversion in that it then focuses the mind in a powerful way. And by doing that, it quiets down all of our monkey mind, all of our thoughts that we've had the same time and every day, over and over and over again, right? And when we're in that place of having silenced that a little bit, just even a little tiny bit, we start to be able to shift things, right? Because we've got these grooves in our mind and they keep going, we keep going down the same track, right? And they've studied I have not personally studied it, but elasticity in the brain, right, has been studied to show that that metaphor is really apt. Like the synapses in our brain actually go in exactly the same direction unless they are rewired. But that rewiring is possible. And mantra is helping us do that. It's helping us not only quiet the mind, but be less rigid in the way that we think, in our emotions, so that we have that flexibility and we have the ability to perceive more broadly, right, the possibilities, what's available to us. And also, in the case of the work we do, who we are and how we're valuable, or how our work is valuable. We're always invaluable. Let's be clear about that, right? We don't have to do anything, say anything, be anything in particular to be valuable as a person. But when we talk about our work, as we've talked about in previous leads with professional identity, we tend to value certain aspects of that and our gifts and talents and training more than others. So it starts to, that's the way it works on the mind, and that's how it's valuable in that capacity. The next piece is that it's a vocalized practice. I guess I'll go there next, right? So we're using our voice. And when we use our voice, we're actually using a tool that is already us. It's already healing to us, right? What's a natural way of self-soothing? Well, to hum, right? Or to sing. We do this. Babies do this. We do this to ourselves. We talk to ourselves. All of those are self-soothing mechanisms. And our voice is more powerful for our own transformation and our own healing because it's already at the vibration that we naturally have. It's at our energy pattern. It is our energy pattern. It expresses our energy pattern. So it's already it's already that clarity of self. Right? And sure, there might be blockages there too, right? We might get sore throats. We might not. It has nothing to do with, and I also want to say it has nothing to do with whether you, quote, like your voice or whether you're a good singer in the way that we kind of think of that or value that, or that you can hold a tune. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with that your voice is part of you as your whole energy pattern. And so you use your own clear energy to attune to the own clear energy and to clear out what is blocking it. Okay? Meanwhile, you're vocalizing and you're creating a vibration. And you're not just creating that vibration through sound, but the vibration is also physical. So you're creating physical vibration, right, in your body. That you're also pronouncing the words and sounds with your mouth, and your tongue is hitting parts of your mouth that hit pressure points. So you're working physically through the voice, as well as through the fact that you're creating the actual sacred sound that's at the energy vibration of these patterns, right? So then that is the subtle energy aspect. We're using the sound to create the vibration of the pattern of energy that we want to cultivate or that we want to move, right? So we spoke about that subtle energy piece in talking about what mantra itself is, and how we choose a practice for you. Okay, and then the last two parts are related. So the last two observational levels, operational aspects that I want to share with you today about this practice are related to the breath. And not only is mantra a vocal practice, vocalized practice, a sound practice, and a physical practice, it's also a pranayama practice. Right? So pranayama, a breath practice. And pranayama is named after, again, just like mantra is, what it works with. And it works with prana, our life force. And so we're moving our life force when we practice mantra. And what this is doing is physiologically, it's oxygenating our blood, right? It's releasing tension through the breathing and allowing a relaxation response. It's lowering your blood pressure. It's been studied. I believe it was Brigham and Women's Hospital. Brigham and Women's Hospital that studied the practice of mantra as well as other practices on post-cardiac surgery patients. And they found that the practice of mantra actually brought the people's level of breathing, right, their rate of breathing down to exactly the recommended rate of breathing. So what the therapists were like encouraging and giving breath practices for patients, post their surgery for cardiac events, mantra will do that naturally. Okay, so it will lower your blood pressure. On a subtle energy level and on a kind of learning level, what we start to do with it is that we start to be able to observe our own energy. We start to be able to observe our own life force, right? And use the practice to be able to allocate it. That's kind of a next step, next level practice with the mantra, but that's part of working with the prana. Right? And the breath is that you need a certain amount of breath to actually chant the practice. And if you don't have that in the right proportion, you're not going to get to the end of your practice. You're going to be winded. And so you have to naturally modulate that. You have to decide when to expel and when to conserve. And it's probably fairly natural, although it might take some practice. Okay? Also related to the prana is the fact that different mantra practices use more or less prana. It takes more breath, meaning we're moving more prana, we're exerting more energy in order to practice them. And that depends on where they're pronounced in the mouth. And again, we get to use the practice to also practice, wow, how am I using my energy? Am I conserving it? Am I allocating it in the way that is most natural for me and most useful for me? We can start to use our mantra practice to begin a practice of that overall. Then, related to breath and prana is the last level at which I want to share. It's not the last level mantra operates on. I wanted to keep it to 5. So you're not like, oh my God, this is overwhelming. And that is that mantra works on karma. And that's a word that's bandied around. That's how I'll put it. Without necessarily a lot of understanding. But it's simply the matter of cause and effect, right? It's the law of cause and effect. It's not about judgment. It's not about retribution, payback, shame, guilt, any of those things. It's one thing happened and a chain of other things happened, and we remember this energetically, and it's held energetically. So karma isn't something that's out there that we did that's going to come back to us in some way. It's with us. We hold it. It's in the breath. So it's held in the energetic body. And so as a pranayama practice, mantra transforms by breaking up these patterns that are held in the energy body through the breath and the sound. I hope that was clearer than mud. Your mind might be going, yeah, I don't know. And that's okay. Again, it's like let's do the practice. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. So we were talking about listening for the disruption, right? And that being the same thing that's probably tripping you up and making you feel like you're going around in circles or don't have the clarity you want or can't move forward, however you're experiencing that. And so when we get to that place where it's like, oh my gosh, I've tried everything and like this just keeps coming up. I don't know what to do with it. Like I can't seem to get past it. That is evidence that there's a karmic knot there. There's something we've been working with and working on for a long time that's teaching us. And a mantra practice can work directly with that. That said, I want to reiterate that I want to recognize that for some of you, maybe the idea of like reaching that unreachable place that's stuck or where you haven't been able to get a foothold may feel terrifying. It may feel like, well, I can't do that because not just I don't know what will happen, but there may be violence to me in that, right? It might. And so I want to go back to the gentleness of this and say that the right practice for you will encompass that aspect. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I had a teaching. It was actually last year. I had this moment in a practice with a friend and colleague of mine where, something was really coming up. Like I was like, wow, I'm like really afraid of that. And that is a really long-standing fear. And it's not just my fear. It's a archetypical fear. Like we as a society have this fear because there has been real violence around it. There has been real death and persecution around it. And the wisdom that I received was that was not something to be pulled up at the root. Like I couldn't just expect to like apply practices to it or ask myself to apply practices to it and like rip it out and throw it away. That would do violence to me. And it actually wasn't why it was there and wasn't going to be useful. Right? So the key was to work with the practice, not to rip it up and throw it away. And so I'm going to say the same thing to you. If there is fear, hesitation, if your body goes back when you think of the actuality of doing a practice that might touch upon what hasn't yet quite been able to be touched upon, that the approach is really not to pull it out at the root. The approach, it's an unraveling, not an uprooting. You can think of that as unwinding twine, but you can also think of it as like water or like warm oil, right? Just massaging. It's to understand the wisdom that's bound up there and release it for you to actually utilize. So that is my hope, my intention, and my wish for you and certainly all of my clients in utilizing this practice and in working together. So I'm happy to take any questions. I think I've been talking some time. It doesn't tell me the time, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you want to pop them in the comments. And if you'd like to experience practicing together, I'm going to drop a link. You can sign up for a one-on-one practice. And if you're more curious about how would it work? How would it work for me, for you, and I to work together in a mantra practice? We can certainly talk about that too, at your request. But I will drop a link to a one-on-one practice. Hi, Sue. Oh, yeah, I love that. So Sue says, I see it as a feminine versus masculine approach to resolving blocks and fears. Yeah, that idea that we're supposed to like confront this block and like stare it down and pull it out and eradicate it, right? I mean, it's like really violent. Really violent, as opposed to get into relationship with it, which is, yeah, I can see a much more feminine approach. And that's what it is. And so, yeah, as a mantra, it is a direct practice. We can get very direct and very specific, but the aim of the directness and the specificity is to come into relationship with what's happening. So really just listen to me, like write this off, like just into further relationship with yourself. But that's really what it is. That is really the only thing that it is. One more thing I thought to share. Sometimes I get questions. I'm going to stop soon because I've gone on longer than usual and I don't want to take more of anyone's time and I should go on to the rest of my day. But I'm going to make a note to do another live about cultural appropriation questions that I've gotten with regard to doing a mantra practice or any of these practices from Tantric Shaivism if you are not a devoted practitioner, right? You have a different path, spiritual path, a different belief system, etc. And I want to speak to the other aspect of that, which is that my experience, I'm trying to remember what this is. Where did I start this? Sorry. But my experience is that the practice actually again, not only does it take you on the journey that is exactly right for you to be on, right? But it shares with you what you need. Like it shows up to you as you. One of the most powerful experiences I have had with a client is doing this practice with a client for whom this was not her set of practices. And she received, during the practice, she received the wisdom that no, this was not her lineage of practice. And then the mantra, right, the pattern, the deity that we were working with, the divine pattern, showed her who and what her lineage is. I'm getting chills thinking about her describing it to me now, which is something she had never had before. She had not recognized it in that way. She had not embraced it in that way. She had not committed to her own lineage or thought of herself in a lineage holder in her work in that way before. And what it showed me is that these practices are universal. right? The divine is universal, and it is detached. Like, it does not care how you most like to engage with it. It's going to engage with you, as the way that most transforms you, that's most meaningful for you, that is most fascinating to you. It's not going to demand that you show up or you relate to it in a particular way. And so while these practices are from a particular tradition and developed over time in a particular tradition, and we need to give that acknowledgement and respect, and part of that is working with someone who is practiced, they're universal in their application and ability to be practiced and to be effective. Because when we engage with that divine pattern, or just when we engage with the divine in general, it doesn't matter what door we come in. We get to be in relationship the way we need and want to be in relationship. So I just wanted to share that too, because sometimes I get questions about that. Okay, I welcome any comments or questions. In the comments here, I'm going to drop a link to practice with me, to request to practice with me and schedule one-on-one. You're so welcome. Thanks for being here live, Sue. And I will see you all soon. Have a great week.